I apologize for this first bit here. So if you want to skip ahead 3 minutes to get to the actual review part, that's fine. This opening is just going to be me talking about why I'm doing this. Alright, so over the past month or so, I have been reading through all of Spider-Man. Well, I'm started to read through it. My goal is to read every single issue of any main Spider-Man thing before the new movie comes out. You know, it's kind of a lot because there are 1,600 issues of Spider-Man spread over multiple series. Amazing Spider-Man, The Web of Spider-Man, and Spectacular Spider-Man, and there's Ultimate Spider-Man, and Spider-Man Unlimited, and Peter Parker Spider-Man, regular Spider-Man, Spider-Man 1660, Spider-Man Noir, like, there's even more than that. Yeah, so there's a lot. So yeah, like, I'm reading all of it. So yeah, so this video is the review of just the first 100 or so issues, and then after that I'm going to review every year individually because I didn't get this idea till now, and at some point there's going to be probably 4 or 5 different series running at the same time, so I'm gonna have to stick to that 1 year of issues reviewed at a time thing. Sometimes there will be a lot of issues to review, sometimes there will be less. Well, I mean, I'm not going to review every single issue individually in each video. It's going to be a collective thing, bringing together the main points of the whole story that I've read so far. And yeah, originally I was just going to read The Amazing Spider-Man, but there are so many stories that cross over multiple series that it's just easier this way, believe it or not. So that's what I'm doing, and that's what this video and the following videos are about. Alright, let's start with the general story so far. It starts out with Peter in high school, obviously, and the only characters other than him, well, obviously there's Aunt May, and then at school he has Flash Thompson bullying him constantly, along with Liz, who, you know, you probably never heard of, and then some other guy, I can't even remember who he is, but basically Liz was the one that kind of was telling everybody to take it easy on him every once in a while, even though she joined in most of the time. But yeah, I don't think she was really ever a love interest for him, even though for some reason every single girl in Spider-Man is always attracted to Peter Parker for some reason. I don't know. And so yeah, so then he graduates high school in around issue 30 or something like that. Then he meets Gwen Stacy, and again Flash Thompson is at the college that he goes to, and that's where he meets Harry Osborn as well. And so they're all friends, but Flash rips on him constantly. Even at the beginning, Harry is just as bad as Flash. He's just ripping into Peter Parker every chance he gets. And even Gwen, a little bit, even though she's secretly attracted to him. And so eventually things kind of work out, you know, so that they're all kind of friends, and they're not really hating on Peter Parker too much. So yeah, and then also he runs into Mary Jane after a while. And see, it's funny because they introduce her only in name at the beginning. Aunt May's like, hey, you gotta date this girl, Mary Jane. I hear she's pretty cool. And Peter's like, oh, come on. Why are you doing this to me? And then she keeps coming up in conversation. Aunt May's like, hey, you gotta meet this girl. You gotta go on a date with her. And then, you know, sometimes he'll be like about to go on a date with her, and then something comes up and he can't do it. Or, you know, Mary Jane gets sick and then he can't go on a date with her. And And then at some point, finally, you see her, and then, you know, Mary Jane's like this, you know, goddess of a woman, and Peter Parker's like, whoa, like, whoa. And, you know, it's funny because she's not a love interest for him really at all, even up until the point that I've read at issue 100, or even 103, 104. The love interest for him is Gwen Stacy for most of the time. And it's just kind of off and on, like, he'll do something to screw it up, and, you know, just being Spider-Man will screw up everything for him, and then he wins her back because she can't stop thinking about him or something like that. So, yeah, and then that's the general overarching story throughout this whole thing. Aunt May gets sick all the time, and Peter Parker has to go deal with her and also be Spider-Man. And something I've noticed is that when somebody's in the hospital and Spider-Man's supposed to be there, or, well, Peter Parker's supposed to be there for him, he always has to skip out and be Spider-Man real quick. And then when he comes back, he finds out that the person's awake, and they were asking, like, where's Peter? Where's Peter at? They get mad at him for not being there for him. A few times I have been on the brink of crying profusely. I've gotten tears welling up into my eyes because of this. And I think the biggest thing for me so far has been the death of George Stacy, Gwen Stacy's father, who's also the captain of the police force. He saves a kid, and, like, rubble falls on him, and then Spider-Man takes him off to a roof. Sitting there talking to Spider-Man, he's like, listen, Spider-Man, I'm dying. You gotta listen to me. Take care of Gwen. She's just not gonna have anybody after I die, except for you, Peter. And, you know, so he's like, oh, hey, you knew who I am this whole time. You didn't tell anybody. So I thought that was kind of cool that they showed that, you know, it's not like nobody can guess who Spider-Man is, but, you know, like, somebody did, but they just didn't say anything because they're pretty cool. And yeah, so that made me sad that he died. And yeah, and, you know, different times with, like, stuff that Aunt May says and stuff that Gwen Stacy says, and, you know, the whole dynamic between their relationship with Peter, you know, every once in a while it gets a little emotional, and you don't see that too often in comic books. I'm not saying it doesn't happen, I'm just saying you don't see it too often. One storyline that I noticed would make a great movie, up on par with, like, you know, the Nolan Batman movies as far as quality comic book stories go. Now, it wasn't my favorite story in the, you know, Spider-Man issues, but it would make a great movie, okay? And it's basically this one guy running for DA, and he's just pretty much a complete jerk. And he's a racist and everything, and he's using George Stacy's death to help him win the election. And Gwen Stacy even joins up with him because she wants him to take down Spider-Man, because she blames Spider-Man for the death of her father. And so he's like, yeah, I'll take that. So, yeah, then, you know, everything fails miserably for him because Spider-Man exposes him for who he is. Well, technically not Spider-Man, okay, it's Joe Robertson at the Daily Bugle. He has been collecting stuff about him, and he exposes him in the Daily Bugle, and that's it. That's all, you know, it's done. And, yeah, so that's that. Now, the public opinion of Peter Parker and Spider-Man is kind of funny to me, because it seems like 98% of the time, people either hate Spider-Man and love Peter Parker, or they love Spider-Man and hate Peter Parker. Like, there's not too much middle ground. One of the exceptions being J. Jonah Jameson, who hates Peter Parker and hates Spider-Man, so, but he hates everybody, so it doesn't really count. And, you know, even Peter Parker hates Spider-Man. on many occasions he has been like, why am I doing this? I hate Spider-Man. He ruins everything for me. And then he's just like, well, I got to do it. Actually, the very first love interest for Peter Parker was Betty Brant, a secretary at the Daily Bugle. And eventually she just doesn't like his whole adventurous side of, always finding Spider-Man and taking pictures of him. And obviously he is Spider-Man, so that's even worse. And yeah, so she doesn't like that. So she finds this guy Ned Leeds and starts dating him, and then eventually she runs away because she can't decide between the two. And then when she comes back, Peter is like, I don't really feel the same way about you now, because I don't know, maybe it wasn't what I thought it was. So she marries Ned Leeds, and that's that. So Peter Parker moves on and eventually finds love in Gwen Stacy. And yeah, and then they're, they he has been on dates with Mary Jane Watson, but it's never like been a serious relationship like it has been with Gwen Stacy. And unfortunately, I do know that Gwen Stacy dies, and I know that it's going to happen within the next 10 to 20 issues, so I'm not looking forward to that, because I actually prefer the Gwen Stacy relationship than Mary Jane. So that will make me sad. And I just find it funny that Peter Parker just has all the girls swooning over him all the time. It's really kind of ridiculous. Like, even Mary Jane was dating Harry for a while, and even when she would be dating him, she would be like, hey, Peter, like, you're looking good, want to take me out sometime? Or, like, really laying on the flirtiness really heavy. And it's just like, I don't know why these girls think he's like the cream of the crop, dreamiest man they've ever seen. I don't know. Well, I guess, I don't know, they do draw him pretty attractive in the comics, so I guess maybe that's why. Anyway, let's move on to the villains. Alright, one villain that I'm very sad has not been part of the bigger Spider-Man catalog, and been more popular, and he's never shown up. I don't even remember him from the 90s cartoon, but maybe he was in there once or twice. The Prowler. I think he has he has the coolest villain costume in all of Spider-Man. And he has some pretty cool gadgets, and he has an interesting enough backstory, really. Because he starts out as a window washer, and he's, secretly invents like all this safety equipment to help out with window washing, and then he gets fired. Maybe he quits. It's one of the two, probably both. Probably he's like, I quit, no, you're fired, something like that. But he goes and he puts all of his safety equipment together into a suit, because he thinks, hey, I'm going to go be a superhero and get some money that way, because I really want to marry this girl. And so then he thinks, actually it's easier to be a villain. It's going to be faster to get money that way. And it's, because I'd have to wait to, be a superhero. I'd have to wait till, whatever. And I can just go out right now and be a villain and get some money. So he goes and does that, and, he has a fight with Spider-Man, and then, Spider-Man reveals, and he's like, you're not really that bad of a guy. I'm going to let you go. And because the Prowler does realize, like, I probably shouldn't be doing this. And he stops doing it. So that was pretty cool. But then Spider-Man asks him for a favor, and to help dissuade any suspicion that Peter Parker and Spider-Man are the same person, he has the Prowler come in to a room with everybody dressed as Spider-Man, so that, Peter Parker's standing there, Spider-Man's standing there, and then, hey, I guess they're not the same person. And then later, after George Stacy dies, the Prowler comes back, and he's like, listen, Spider-Man, I think you were framing me and setting me up for something, using me, to dress as Spider-Man with George Stacy and everything, because George Stacy was in the room. And, Spider-Man's like, listen, no, it wasn't like that. I didn't kill George Stacy, and I didn't, set you up or anything. And then everything's all good in the end. Moving on. All right, the Chameleon. I do like the idea of the Chameleon, but so far in the comics, it's really, really hard to believe that he can do what he can do. Because, it's hard enough to believe that they can, put new faces on in Mission Impossible movies and, like, rip them off, and it's hard enough to believe that. But when you put on top of that, he's just, like, puts on a new face, and then he's instantly, like, exactly the same as that person. That's pretty hard to believe. He's just, like, ripping off faces and putting new ones on, and he's like, and, yeah, so that's, I don't know, I'm not digging it right now. But I did like in the 90s cartoon how he had a button on his belt that would change him into looking like a different person. There have been ways of doing that idea well. So far, the Chameleon is not really working for me at the moment. Electro. He has the dumbest costume out of all the villains. The dumbest. His face mask is like really, really stupid. But I do like him as a villain. I like his, electricity powers and all that stuff. I just really don't like the costume at all. I really wish somebody would redesign it. Maybe they will later in the series. I don't know. We'll see. And I would say the Green Goblin is probably the best villain at this moment, because he pretty much defeats Spider-Man every single time, and it's really just by chance that he ever is defeated himself, or Spider-Man usually just runs away from the fight in the end. But yeah, I mean, at one point the Green Goblin actually unmasks Spider-Man. He's like, hey, you're Peter Parker. And then Peter Parker's like, finds out that the Green Goblin is actually Norman Osborn, Harry's dad. And so it's a big like, whoa, because in that issue, like, you find out, that's who the Green Goblin is. Wow, okay. And then, somebody knows who Peter Parker is, so, Spider-Man fights him, and he knocks him out, and then he burns the clothing and stuff, and Norman kind of snaps out of it, and he's like, oh man, what's going on? And then he gets amnesia, and he doesn't remember anything about Peter Parker and Spider-Man. And then later in the series, he starts kind of, struggling, like, mentally, and he's like, man, I keep thinking of Spider-Man, and it makes me mad, and then keep getting flashes of, Green Goblin, or, I hate Parker, and then, so, eventually he becomes the Green Goblin again, and then Spider-Man somehow defeats him, and then he's like, goes back to, having amnesia or whatever. So, yeah, I mean, he's pretty worthy adversary, I'd say. But there have been great villains. I mean, I don't have to talk about, like, Doc Ock or, Venom. Well, Venom hasn't even been in the series yet. But, it's like Sandman and Vulture and all that stuff. They're all great. And, there have been some great villains so far, and I'm pretty happy with it. Morbius was just in the last issue or two, and he was pretty awesome. And but yeah, there have been some villains that, you know, haven't quite cut it. Like, they have definitely been filler issues where they really couldn't think of anything. Like, specific examples that come to mind are Medusa, with, you know, a woman that can control her hair and make it move and grab things, and she's from some underground race of non-humans that, you know, want to come up, but they're afraid that the humans are jerks or something like that. So she goes back down and, you know, forgets about humans because she realizes they are jerks. Then there's the kangaroo, and he can jump really high, and that's pretty much his power. But it's not even a superpower because he says that he's trained for it. Like, he trained to do this, and he's now able to jump really high and stuff. And it was really a lame villain. The issue itself, like the non-kangaroo parts, where it was just Peter Parker, like, that was pretty good. Like, I find that even if I don't really necessarily like the story of, like, you know, the villain or like what they're doing, or if I don't like the villain himself, I still like the Peter Parker story. In fact, I generally like the Peter Parker, you know, his interactions with his friends and family and stuff like that, more than the actual Spider-Man and the fighting of Spider-Man and all that stuff. I just do, you know? Now to Peter Parker's mental anguish. He really hates Spider-Man, and he does not want to be Spider-Man. On several occasions, he has quit being Spider-Man, and then he realizes, I gotta do it. So, he's stuck doing this thing that he doesn't want to do, but he kind of wants to do. And then, you know, it's just tough. Because he feels like it's, you know, his responsibility. Like, he was given this gift to help people, so he has to do it. But, you know, he just doesn't want to because it ruins everything for him in his personal life. You know, relationships with girls and his friends and everything is just like... So, yeah, man, it's tough. But yeah, he always comes back. He always comes back. Let's talk about the dialogue. In general, the dialogue isn't that great most of the time, but, you know, sometimes they'll have some good stuff. In the late 60s, like, once it gets to, like, basically the second Mary Jane is introduced, all of the dialogue is very jive heavy, and it's just like everything is like, hey man, what you doing, you know, like, you're a cool cat, like, all that kind of stuff. Like, it is so dense with that, and it's just, I mean, obviously it was I don't know if it was the main you know, common language that everybody was saying, but, you know, it's very I don't know, I don't like it. Also, throughout the entire thing so far, every sentence ends with an exclamation point, unless it's a question, or otherwise it's just an ellipse, you know, 3 dots, 3 periods, and it's just all exclamation points. Everybody is just shouting everything that they're saying, and it's really, I don't know, I guess it's just Stan Lee's way of talking. And one thing that I really don't like, but I understand that they almost have to do it the way they do it, is there is a lot of exposition. And, like, it seems like everybody is always talking about what they're doing. Like, the villains are like, yes, now that I'm free from jail, I can go steal that armored car and you know, then I'll be rich, and like, it's just like, okay, you know, I don't sit around constantly thinking about everything that I'm doing. And sometimes they're not even just thinking it, they're just saying it out loud, like, oh man, I need to go downstairs and get a cup of water so I'm not thirsty anymore. You know, like, I don't sit around and think about this stuff all the time. It's, but obviously, you know, you need to convey to the readers how, like, what's going on. You know, you can't just have pictures and be like, well, you know, he's doing something, so figure it out. Like, I mean, I understand that they kind of have to do it that way, because otherwise, what are they going to do? And one thing that Spider-Man says a lot that I find very stupid, and I realize it's not necessarily just a Spider-Man thing, it's a slightly common phrase, but like, he'll say, like, man, if I ever needed you, spider strength, I need you now, you know, or it's something like that. Like, insert anything instead of spider strength. Oh man, if I ever needed you, webbing, I need you now. Oh man, if I ever needed to jump high, I need to do it now. You know, like, every single time he needs to do something, he just says something like that. And it's just like, okay. One thing, you know, the webbing. All right, let's talk about the webbing. He can make, and I'm talking about Spider-Man here. Spider-Man can make anything out of his webbing. He can make life-size versions of himself out of webbing and put it in his suit, or, you know, stuff it under his covers on his bed so that nobody will suspect he's there. Or, you know, he can, like, there's some things that I'm fine with, like making little web balls and like hitting them at people, or, you know, making a web parachute, you know, or, you know, just stuff like that. But when I mean, I wouldn't be surprised if they gave him a web helicopter at some point. It's that ridiculous. Like, I mean, he literally on several occasions he's sat there and like, well, I got to make this web version of myself quick so that I can, you know, fool people. And it's just like, I'm not buying it, you know? Yeah, and then in the one issue, like I said, he puts the web version of himself in his bed, and Aunt May sees it, and she faints, you know, because she's like, what is going on? I thought Peter was going to be here. And then, you know, he has to come home and, you know, fix it by, like, being like, what? I didn't see anything. What are you talking about? I'm right here, you know? And then Aunt May thinks that she's senile, which she kind of is, but, you know, Peter's like, oh man, why did I have to make her think that she's crazy now? Like, she's gonna think she's insane. And it's all my fault. It's always his fault. Everything he does is just awful. So yeah, Aunt May is senile, believe it or not. Because she's just constantly, like, thinking like, oh man, Peter is so frail. He needs my help. Why? He's just, that Peter, he's gonna get into so much trouble. He's so frail. Like, every single time she mentions Peter, she mentions how frail he is, and it's ridiculous. But yeah, in that respect, I do like the way that Sam Raimi portrayed Aunt May in the movies. I like that version of Aunt May better, because, you know, on the one hand, she's slightly naive, but most of the time she's pretty, you know, headstrong and, you know, pretty good. I liked it. And yeah, speaking of Sam Raimi's movies, I do prefer organic webbing, because I think that a high school student, no matter how smart you are, you're not going to be able to reproduce webbing. And least of all, he makes asbestos webbing. That is a little known fact. He makes his webbing with asbestos so that he can use it to deter flames. And yeah, so go figure. I think I like the organic webbing better, because, I don't know, it fits. Another thing I don't like is Spider-Man's spider tracer. he uses it when he's too weak to fight an enemy and he needs to fight him at some other time when he comes up with a plan, or if he sees somebody go into a building and he's like, oh, well, I need to follow them and keep tabs on them. He'll throw this little spider tracer onto their backs, and, you know, then later he'll be, like, using his spider sense to find out where the tracker is. And first of all, he makes it in the shape of a spider, which, you know, anybody's going to be like, hey, well, Spider-Man's following me. I better, you know, ditch this thing. And, you know, it's like, I would believe it more if, first of all, in the 1960s, come on, please. You're not going to make a minute, you know, small little spider tracer and track it with your spider sense. Like, I just don't know how he would make something that he can use his spider sense to sense. I don't know. Unless he fills it with danger or something. I don't know. Maybe that's what he does. He just fills it with danger so he can tell where it is. Because that's what his spider sense picks up. Danger. And yeah, these spider tracers, I don't like them. I don't think, I mean, obviously sometimes it's necessary because, you know, what are you going to do? How are you going to finish the story if you don't have it? But if it was today, you know, like a little square thing that he could, like, maybe, like, just brush onto somebody's coat, like something like that, I would believe that, yeah, sure. And, like, you know, maybe he uses a GPS to find it or something like that. But obviously in the 60s, finding it hard to believe. Another thing, I don't like his spider signal. I think it's kind of pointless, and it wouldn't even work in the first place. Yeah, I mean, what's the point of... The only point of his spider signal that he has on his belt, like, it shines out a spider face onto a wall or a floor. That's all it does. It's just project Spider-Man's face onto a wall. And the only point of it is to announce that he's about to enter the room or about to kick somebody's butt. So, like, really? Like, do you need that? Like, hey, I'm about to come in and attack you. Like, that seems kind of counterproductive. I'd rather just, you know, jump in and attack and, you know, beat them and, you know, not have them know that I'm about to. I think that would serve a better purpose. And also, yeah, it would never work because, I mean, yeah, you put a Spider-Man thing in a flashlight, maybe it's going to work. But this thing would be the equivalent of having a projector on your belt and projecting an image. Like, it's not just a flashlight flashing an image, it's projecting an image, because he only ever goes out at night, so, you know, he's using this at night, and it's going to have to project, it's going to have enough light to, you know, really get that thing onto a brick wall that's already red, or, like, you know, so, I don't know, I'm not buying that either, but, you know, whatever. Alright, now, you know that, you know, Peter Parker takes pictures of Spider-Man, so, like, he has a camera that he carries around, and he just straps it up somewhere and, you know, has it take automatic pictures of him. So, but recently, within the last few issues, maybe 10 issues or so, I don't know, he makes a micro camera to put onto his belt, and it is literally the size of maybe a guitar pick. That's something like that. And I have to question, first of all, before anything else, how is it going on to film? There's no film. Like, it's smaller than the width of film, and there's, even if you'd have to have a way to have the film in there in the first place. And I know it's not taking digital pictures in the 1960s, please. I'm a little smarter than that. And even if it did, it would require a lot more than just a very tiny camera. Because no matter what, even if you can do that, and I'm sure there are small cameras out there that take decent enough pictures, that has to be a lot of money. It has to be a lot of money spent on that thing, and Peter Parker ain't no rich man. So I just don't know about that. It's kind of ridiculous how small that camera is, and there's no way it's in the 1960s. Definitely not. Even today, I would question it very, very much. Now, another thing, going back to his spider sense, it is way too sensitive sometimes. Like, I mean, I'm willing to believe that, you know, his spider sense can pick up, like, something bad's about to happen. I need to keep a watch, you know, like, oh no, like, what's, you know, something's about to go down, and, or, like, somebody's attacking me from, like, here. But, like, he can just use it to sense anything. Like, he'll be in a dark room, and he'll be like, I know that guy's moving. I know he's moving that way, and yeah, so I've got to follow him down that way. It's like, okay, wow, your spider sense is kind of like, I don't know what it is. It's not this, I don't know, it's, I don't know. Like, yeah, he'll do, so one time he blacked out the lights, and then he was like, all right, I know, now I can sense where they are, and, you know, like, I'm sure that, you know, with his spider scent, or, like, his spider abilities, yeah, sure, his vision's probably going to be better, you know, but, like, he'll use it to detect, like, just detect people moving around or something like that. But, yeah, it's pretty far-fetched to me, how extremely sensitive it is. And, like, I don't know. And, like, just flying, like, he just swings past buildings, and he'll be like, all right, so they're in that building there, you know, and, okay, yeah, sure, he senses danger in that building, but, you know, like, he can almost, like, skew his spider sense to hone in on a specific person or something like that. Like, all right, I need to go find Doc Ock, so I'm going to swing around until I pick up something with my spider sense. But it's like, he would pick up, like, any kind of danger. Like, how does he know it's specifically Doc Ock, or unless he's, you know, unless he can kind of tune it like a radio to pick up just Doc Ock. So, I don't know. I guess maybe. Yeah. And he always breaks through windows. Like, he never, like, opens a window or goes through a door or anything. Like, he always just breaks windows relentlessly. Like, he'll just, like, I'm pretty sure I've seen, like, a shot of him breaking through a window and there's a door right beside him. Like, it just seems like needless destruction. Yeah. And another thing, he fights the Human Torch a lot, which I did not know. Like, he's fought him probably at least 6 or 7 times already, and, you know, it's just, yeah. I mean, I find it kind of cool. You know, he's fighting with this other superhero. They're both kind of egomaniacs a little bit. You know, think they're pretty great. But, you know, and so their egos kind of get in the way and clash with each other. So, I don't know, it's kind of fun times. But I didn't really know that he fought with, you know, Human Torch like that. All right, now the annuals I'm going to talk about separately because they're not part of the continuing story. They're just kind of their own thing. It's like they would release one issue every year, like a special annual issue that wasn't part of the continuity of the series. It was just kind of like, hey, here's an extra issue, you know, of cool stuff. And it was double-sized, you know, whatever. And the first one was great. It had it introduced the Sinister Six, and so it had, you know, he had to fight through 6 villains, you know. Basically, Doc Ock kidnapped Betty Brant and Aunt May, and then made Spider-Man fight through all 6 of his worst villains just to find out where they were, and then fight Doc Ock, and to get them back. And that was pretty awesome, because each fight would have a full page of, like, a full page shot of them fighting, and it was just really, like, cool. Like, it was just like you would be guaranteed with each villain one shot, like one full page of just awesome, like, action and stuff. And it was pretty neat. And another Aunt May is just freaking senile, because she thinks Doc Ock. She sees that he has these crazy tentacle things, and that she's been kidnapped, and she's seen him on the news before being an evil monster, and she's like, oh, he's such a nice man, so polite and everything. And Betty Brant's just like, what? Are you kidding me? And Aunt May just is completely oblivious. Like, I just don't understand. Yeah, and I know about another thing that's coming up pretty soon. I won't say it yet. I'll just wait for that review. But yeah, she's just one ridiculous old lady. One of the other annual issues featured Peter finding out about his parents. Apparently, they used to be spies. And so he goes to investigate, and it turns out that they were working for Red Skull, and he's like so crushed. He's like, oh man, how could they work for this creep? He investigates further and finds out that they were actually American agents working undercover with Red Skull. So, it's all good in the end. And that was just kind of cool to, get some backstory about his parents and all that. But most, like, now the annual issues have become just reprinting old stories. Like, they'll just have like a story from like issue 30 or issue 20 or something like that. They'll just reprint it and be like, hey, here you go. I think that's kind of cheap. I'd like to see more interesting one-shot story things, instead of just reprinting old ones, because I don't know, I guess at that time they were like, well, maybe they haven't read this one, so anybody that's new to Spider-Man can go back and read this one and they'll be happy and stuff. But I guess part of that is also because I've been reading through chronologically and I've already read these, and so that's why I get frustrated. But I guess back then maybe it was pretty exciting. And I just want to say that one of the last issues I read was just a rip off of King Kong, pretty much, and it was pretty lame. I've heard that it kind of I'm past the Silver Age, so I've heard that it kind of gets bad after this. So I'm hoping that there's still some good stuff for a while, just because I don't want to have to read through 200 issues of crap or something to get to anything good. But we'll see. So, yeah, overall, I have given mostly 4 out of 5 stars to each issue. That's another thing. I'm rating each issue just so I can remember, and when I go back ever, I can be like, okay, this was a good one, this was a good one, this was a pretty good one, this was not a very good one. So I don't have to redo this whole thing. Probably will anyway someday. But yeah, so I've given out mostly 4s. I've given out a few 5s. I'm trying my best to be sparing with those, like really for issues that are absolutely like top notch, really amazing, like hit me hard, like emotionally or something, or was just really, really cool. But then I have handed out quite a bit of 3s, and I've handed out a few 2s as well, and even a 1, I think. So, it's not infallible, but it's pretty good most of the time. Yeah, so that's Spider-Man. So come back for the review of year 1972, which is bound to have some pretty crazy issues.